Hello, Captains. In this video, I'll share my Zoro deck list, which performed exceptionally well and secured victory in 2 store championships last week, on Thursday and Saturday. Before we get into the card showcase, I want to mention that many people have asked about the Playmate I'm using, which I featured on my Reddit post. You can find a link in the video description with a discount code if you want to grab one for yourself. Also, if you haven't already, please hit the subscribe button to help this channel grow. Your support means a lot. Let's start with the card choices. I included 4 copies of Buggy in the deck because he's one of the primary searchers. Buggy is instrumental in fetching removal cards or late-game options like Fiery Doll or Diable. He is also a pain in the ass for decks like Law since they have a lot of slash characters. Continuing the list, I included 4 copies of Izo, who is responsible for getting Marco into your hand. 4 copies of Makino, primarily for her 2000 counter, and her ability to push some damage in combination with Izo or other 1-dan characters. I included 3 copies of Otama to assist Vista or Marco in dealing with enemy threats. I cut the 4th copy of her because I'm also using Gordon in this list, and I wanted to put bigger threats in KO range. Next up is Magra to deal additional damage with the other 1-dan characters. While his on-play effect is similar to Makino, he only has 1000 counter, so I've included 2 copies of him. 4 copies of Dadan to find our 1-dan cards. She also keeps your options open to find a searcher or a buffer at the right time, even if she is drawn at the late game. For Roronoa Zoro, I've gone with 3 copies. Some players run 4 copies of him, but I found that he tends to get stuck in your hand since he isn't a card that is played on your second round. So I decided to cut 1 copy of him. I included 2 copies of Vista since I expected a significant number of Law and Zoro decks in the tournaments. I debated between Nico Robin and Vista, but since I ended up playing a list without Nami, I ultimately chose Vista to help in the early game. 2 copies of Gordon. I cleared a 7-dan Luffy and a Nami with a single Fire Fist more than 3 times in 2 days. 3 copies of Marco are in the deck, as he's clearly the MVP, and most opponents struggle to deal with him. 2 copies of Brook, another card to put in KO range characters for the Fire Fist. He performs very nice against decks without removals like Doffy and Katakuri. One of the best things to play in your second turn. I've included 3 copies of Jozu due to his 2000 counter. After cutting the 4th Otama, I ended up adding a 3rd Jozu since he's searchable with Izo. 2 copies of Fiery Doll are included because this card is incredibly powerful. I even won a semi-final match due to an unexpected 4000 buff while my opponent was calculating an 8000 attack. I have 3 copies of Guard Point in the deck. While this deck is generally on the offensive, using Guard Point to protect Zoros or Buggies can give you a significant tempo advantage. 2 copies of Fire Fist, which is the best removal option in the deck. Combining Fire Fist with Gordon or Otama allows you to eliminate almost any threat. While many Zoro lists don't include Gum Gum Jet Pistol, I've included 2 copies in my deck. It caught opponents off guard in my meta, and performed very nice against cards like Queen, Law, and Tesoro. 1 copy of Radical Beam for the obvious reason that we can't use 4 of them. For the final blow, I've added 1 copy of Diable Jambe. This card doesn't get stuck in your hand as well since you can always discard it to save Marco. Lastly, I've included 1 copy of Bad Manners Kick Course. It was mostly discarded for Marco in most games, except one instance where it saved me from a lethal 14,000 damage hit, so it earned its spot in the deck for the second tournament as well. In the last slot of the deck, I initially had 2 Sanji for the counter and drawing power ability. However, on Saturday I replaced one of them with a 5-dan Luffy. That's all for today, Captains. I will also share the deck list in the description in case it's more helpful, and I will see you on the next episode of Game Fact Files.